And you'd only get like 20 pictures out of one battery, and then you had to change the batteries.
Was it a disposable battery?
To them it was, yeah, it was not rechargeable.
Oh, wow.
Attendance complete and cross-check.
Roger, Dodger. Any changing in the top 5, John?
Stand by. Negative. Courtney is number 5. Bill's 4. Alex, you, and then some weird guy.
I think it's spelled Pretto, P-R-E-T-T-O.
Fredo, do you still have your original iPhone in box? You could sell it for $63,000.
I saw that. I don't have it anymore. I've got all the boxes up here on my shelf. I've got all my original boxes up there.
Does it make sense to trade your iPhone in or keep it?
I keep 2 versions of my iPhone, one for secondary and one for a third camera.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and digital production. Our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today, the folks from Ross are going to be here. They're going to be talking about dashboard. Really excited to have them on, so stay tuned for that. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Mitch, what do we have?
Alex, our first question is in from me. I don't know why I got to be the first, but here I am. Rode has just released the 5th generation NT1. It's a hybrid analog digital condenser mic that could be an MV7 killer. Let's see.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, basically, I saw this come across my desk yesterday, and of course, I kind of tend to compare them as they come into the MV7, the venerable Shure microphone. This is a very interesting mic setup from Rode. Has one big flaw, but I'll get to that in just a second. It is a condenser mic. It is a XLR and USB. It has built-in DSP, and it has AFX processing built into the microphone.
And that's the defect? Is that the defect?
No, I'm moving on to the real defect. But yeah, maybe it sounds great. The only thing is I haven't heard it. I can't judge it. But an interesting cardioid condenser, large format condenser is might be a deal buster in the same price range as the MV7. Here's the problem. The XLR connector has the USB connector built into it. So you can't use them both at the same time. Just stupid.
Oh, well, I don't know if I've never done that before. So I guess that's possible to do both of them at the same time. But I've just never used a USB or XLR at the same time ever. So I don't know how big of a deal breaker that is, but it looks like an interesting mic. Courtney?
They did that for a reason, Mitch, because over the XLR, it's got to require phantom power to power the condenser segments, which is 48 volts, and USB is 5 volts. And you don't want to mix those two power supplies together in the same microphone at the same time. So that's why you haven't seen one before that had both that are usable at the same time, because you don't want to mix those, all the others. Gesundheit, all the others, like the Shures, are dynamic microphones, not condensers.
You go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, it's nothing to sneeze over. It would be interesting to see if anybody would try to make a cable that's an XLR USB cable. But as Courtney said, if it doesn't have enough power, I don't know if you'll be able to do that anyway. And as it being a killer for the MV7, I don't know. I mean, this is a dynamic microphone. They're different.
Mitchell.
Yeah, I was thinking it might be bulletproof. I tend to lean towards the dynamic, particularly if you're going to send it out to places. Condensers are a little more sensitive, but ultimately it comes down to how's the sound, and none of us have heard it, so we can't really judge.
Yeah. How much? What's the price point on it?
$245.
Okay, so they really aimed right at it. I mean, the main thing also when you're sending them out, if you're using them for yourself, it's one thing. If you're sending them out, a lot of times you have to worry about, how roomy is a room, and how much of the echo you're going to pick up, and so on and so forth. Where a dynamic mic will get rid of a lot of that, a larger diaphragm won't. So it'll be interesting to see once we get our hands on one. Next question.
Tom Ferguson from Phoenix, Arizona, and right here on our panel, Aaron Parecki, in his 6-minute clip, has a clever way of implementing video follow audio on an ATEM with Mix Effect Pro. Let's discuss.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Well, he did a 3-camera shoot, and he used 2 mics for switching, and the 2 mics I'm talking about are not even in the audio chain. So he's found a way to do the 3-camera shoot using rules in Mix Effects Pro for the switching. I just thought it was very clever implementation.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it is super cool. In fact, it's supported in their companion module for Stream Deck. You can turn it on and off. But the significant thing that he's done is that most people would give up after being able to switch between 2 cameras. This can do a 2-shot, and he has certain rules that allows that to happen. So the idea that you can have 3 cameras, one in each person, and then a 2-shot, and have it automatically switch, that's amazing.
Go ahead, John.
Hey, Alex, on MacBreak Weekly, do they do audio follows video? Because those switches are super fast. And then I know the lower third goes with it on the switch as well.
Yeah, so the lower third is attached to that input in the TriCaster. It's switched by hand. It's just them paying attention. I don't think there's any audio follows video there, which I think that the hard part, you can build a serviceable show with audio follows video. But it's harder to build a great show without, because a lot of times you're looking for reaction shots, you're hanging on the wide longer, you're making a bunch of creative decisions. Now, I do think that it's great if you don't have someone else to help you and you need to cut a show and you need to go out. I think that it's a great thing to go in between. So people doing kind of one-person band kind of things, I think that makes sense. And we've built them for Hangouts where it was in the software where it would just do the same thing that he's showing there. There were a couple things that we did that were a little different. For instance, we could soft select certain people. So these 2 people are going to talk. I'm never going to cut to these people until, so we could do that. We also could set that 2-shot to a timer. So just go back to it every 2 or 3 seconds or every 10 seconds or 20 seconds. It would just come back to it. That was a lot easier than trying to build rules about when it should actually happen. The other thing we did is be able to have a selection set where you could just hit a button and it would basically do what would be like a macro with an ATEM, where it basically would turn off the auto switching, cut to something, and we hit the button again, it would cut away from that and turn the auto switching back on again. So it was kind of keeping track of that. And so you could do that a little bit more. I will say that you do get effects with an audio follows video that is different than a human, and sometimes it's better, but not always. Go ahead, Chris.
As a director, to me, the holy grail in the example you're giving where you have 2 singles and then the 2-shot is, can you listen to a person wrapping up their response and about a prepositional phrase or maybe a sentence before they're done, can you cut to the 2-shot in anticipation of the host jumping back in?
The L cut.
You'll never get a computer to do that. Ever.
Never is a big word. Never. I think that never is a big word. I think that there's...
I will use the word. Prove me wrong. The other 2 predictions I have made in my career...
Never is a very long time.
The other 2 predictions I've made in my career are that digital photography will never be a thing and QuickTime is a joke and will never be real.
We should do another one. We should do another one with where you've seen the Larry David FTX ad, the incredibly ironic FTX ad, the 2.5-minute version. Watch the 2.5-minute version. My favorite Super Bowl ad ever made. He's like, I don't think this. He's like the wheel, and he's like, I don't think this is gonna work. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think it would be interesting to use it to at least get a rough cut, because if you've got a zoom ISO, A10 ISO, you could come back to resolve later, and because the handles are there, you could say, well, I don't like that. I need that preposition or that pause or whatever.
Chris can correct me, but most editors would prefer not to have a rough cut. Like they'd rather watch it and cut it than to go through it and fix all the edits. I don't know.
That's a super interesting discussion. Yeah. It's a super interesting discussion. I think that if you get to call the show yourself and then polish it, maybe. But I will say that when I am given, actually, I did this for something for you once, Alex, where you gave me a bunch of stuff and said, yeah, we're just going to cut it off of the program feed. And you're like, I was like, no, we're not. And so I took I think it was like 8 cameras or something you gave me, and I synced them all with the program feed.
Right.
And I don't know if I used the program feed at all in the final thing that I gave you.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Go ahead, Courtney.
Just to correct things, you've been referring to it as audio follows video. It's really video follows audio is what you're talking about, because audio follows video is just a button right on your A10.
Yeah.
You can hit it.
It's video follows audio. Thank you for correcting us. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's here with a question. I've been starting to use Mission Control with the 3-finger swipe to activate it, and it's been convenient with Stage Manager and Split View for making laptop screens feel less cramped. Has anyone else used it to streamline mobile workflows?
Go, Jason.
I tried, and I find it more annoying than useful. Maybe I'm just too used to the keystrokes, but, my parents love it.
There you go. Yeah, I did try it as well and did not. It just didn't. I think it. Yeah, I don't know. It's been one of those things that almost everybody with Stage Manager has. I turn almost all those things off. I don't want my computer to do a lot of things. I just need you to do what I ask you to do. I don't want you. Don't get fancy. And so it may be our personalities that just want to do the thing more mechanically. Go ahead, Chris.
Let's just assume maybe some people don't know what these are. What are Mission Control and Stage Manager for the uninitiated?
Yeah, so these are all you have a lot of controls where you can, especially on a trackpad, you can have things where if I go like this on a trackpad, it'll like show my desktop, or if I pull back in, it'll pull it back in. There's gestures that I can do to go into different spaces to activate, so Mission Control is like Apple's ability to use all these gestures to get, lots of screen movement around. And again, what I usually find is that it happens often enough when I don't want it to, that I don't want it to do it at all, which is almost anytime it does something that I didn't expect. I don't usually receive that well. So I think that that's usually why I turn. I literally like spaces makes me crazy. Some people love spaces. I hate them with a passion. And every time I get into a space by accident, like I forgot to, and I'm like, what? And then you can't get it off, and it keeps on wanting to go back to it. And you're just like, I did not ask for this. Like I do not want some other space. Go ahead, Chris.
For those that don't know, Alex is very surprise adverse. It's like, oh, what's that? He doesn't ever want that to happen.
Just like, I did not ask. I am surprise adverse. Next question.
Morgan Price, Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, asks, how can you get HDMI out of a Mac Mini running a Mac OS Ventura at a frame rate of 29.97?
Go ahead, Jason.
Well, there are a few ways to do it. SwitchRes X, which I just put a link in Mukana for, will do this. I wouldn't use it in production. I think your best bet is a decimator if you really need it to work.
Yeah, there is a in the past we were able to, let's see if I can do this. It doesn't. Yeah, it seems to be stuck now. There in the past, if you held down when you went to the refresh rate, and you when you went to the refresh rate, if you held down the option, if you held down the option key, I believe it was option or command, you were able to just select a fractional rate. And I can't do it in Ventura. That might be why this question is here. Go ahead, Courtney.
Don't know for sure, but if you have it plugged into a converter, if you're going, it depends on whether you're coming out of the Lightning or the mini display port into the to HDMI through an adapter, but you should plug it into an old TV set or just a TV set that has an HDMI input, and the EDID should cause it to change refresh rates to match the TV set. It might get it to 2997 or 5994 of the two.
Yeah, we've always had a little bit of trouble with this, and the only way we could really get it to do what we were trying to get it to do, it would go to the right resolution, but the frame rate oftentimes was a little bit more of a challenge. And if you didn't do this kind of option select, but I haven't done it for a couple of years, needed to, because a lot of times I just plug it into the 8-10 minute works or plugs it into whatever. And so I haven't really thought about it as much. But I think that, it used to be something that you'd go into scaling. And the problem is I have so many monitors connected. I think that might also be the problem. But what you can do is, instead of setting the default, you can hit scaling in the older display before Ventura and hold down, I think it's the option key when you select the refresh rate, and you would see fractional numbers there. So you'd be able to 2997 and 5994 and 48.75 or something like that. So those were the ones that were there. Yeah. Next question.
From Clive Kitchener in Sook, British Columbia, Canada. What's your regime for dealing with cookies? Between the sites listed in Mukana and Discord, or just mentioned here and in After Hours, the cookie jar is overflowing. Do you go in and clean them out or just don't care?
You know, I find that turning cookies off tends to make things not run very well. So I don't necessarily, I turn all the cookies off that I can when I go to a site. So it says, how do you want to handle these cookies? And I'm like, oh, just turn off I think that within Mukana and within our webpage, we use the minimum number of cookies necessary. So there's nothing going on in ours because I'm very cookie adverse. So you have to have some cookies or we can't remember that you're there. And we can't keep, that would take away your experience, but we don't do any cookies that are like following you around like a Google Pixel or something like that. And so that's what everybody wants to put in your computer is cookies that allow them to track you from site to site. That's a really, so like for instance, if you have just to give you a back end of why some of these cookies exist is some of them are nefarious, and some of them are just, in an advertising world, operational. So for instance, Google AdWords, when you bid on a Google AdWord and what you pay for it is it isn't just like sign space that you pay $30 for or $3 for or whatever. The way it works is that it tracks your effectiveness of like, did they actually do something with that? So it tracks, they clicked on it and how deep into the site that did they go? Did they actually order? That kind of thing. And if you're more effective, they will lower the price that you pay for your ad. Like literally, because Google wants it to be as effective as possible because they want good ads at the top. So if you have something that isn't going anywhere or you don't track it at all, your ads will be more expensive with Google. They'll let you do it, but you have to pay a lot more to put up an ineffective ad. So people who are really into Google AdWords will get really good, and they want these Google Pixels that are following around. Facebook, same kind of. Facebook's a little different. They want to add to their knowledge of what you like, so their ads are more accurate. And so all of these things. People put these little Facebook Pixels and Google Pixels and cookies and all kinds of other things, and you can turn a lot of that off by doing that. But it wants you to kind of check through that. So that's why a lot of that stuff is there. We don't put any of that stuff on. We just put operational cookies on. Do I delete them? Not very often, because it manually would take too long. And if I delete them all, I suddenly have to log into everything all over again, which would be a pain. Go ahead, Chris.
There's a couple things. One, I don't know that anybody has compiled a great case study of it, but what you're talking about is the effectiveness of ads. One of the candidates in 2016 won because of ad buying strategy. I know that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. Also, I just wonder if the person who coined the term cookies laughs every time they hear people talk about them. Like, where did that word come from?
Like a little cookie. Here, have a cookie. I think that's pretty much it. I think that I will say that ads. These tools that they're getting less effective because of what Apple's doing, other people are doing to close them off, but they're super effective. Like when you see what it looks like for ads for Facebook or for Google, they are the amount of money you spend for the return if you do it well is, a lot of times you're in meetings, people talk about what's your multiplier. It took me a long time to figure out what that meant. They'd say, "Oh, I'm doing like a 5/6 or I'm doing an 8," or sometimes they go, "Oh, I'm only doing a 3," and people were like, "Oh, 3, that's rough." The multiplier was how much money they got out for the money they put in. Like, and it took me a little while because people just randomly just say, "What's your multiplier?" And because that was the first thing they'd ask. They're like, "What's your multiplier?" I got a 3. Oh, we'll work on that. I mean, that's unacceptably low. 8, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, it looks that sounds good." Like it's a. I mean, when you're selling things, they're very, very effective. That's why these companies got so big. Go ahead, Tom.
I just wondered if our overseas friends refer to them as biscuits.
There you go. Go ahead, Mitchell.
To Chris's question, I think that refers to something small, tasty, and leaves crumbs behind.
Yeah, there you go. The crumbs. It's all about the crumbs. Go ahead, Jason.
No, a cookie comes from Magic Cookie that comes from Fortune Cookie, which is the idea is a small sweet thing with a little message inside. That's the origin.
Go ahead, John.
Cookies were invented by Netscape. So 100 years ago, 1994, I think, something in that range.
That's good. All right, next question.
From Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, Office Hours uses Decklink cards and Sonic boxes, but I do not hear much about Ultra Studios. The little 3G or the HD minis are a little less expensive, especially for a Mac owner without slots. Is there a reason not to use these?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
The only thing I noticed is what Alex brought up is that Sonnet makes a really cool one-unit M1 Mac Mini with the Decklink card in it, and I don't think the Ultra is good for that or a 2-unit because it sticks up above the top.
Go ahead,
Might
Jason.
be the reason.
So for a single one of these, you're probably just fine. The real problem is when you actually get into like the logistics of having to address 4 at a time, they get really odd. So along those lines, yeah, you can get away with 1 or 2, but you really don't want to have to address a lot.
Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida, asking, how would you use Dante PTP?
I have to admit that I haven't had to use Dante P2P. so I think that I don't know how I would use it. I usually would ask Brian or someone else to figure that out. So I think try asking that tomorrow, and we'll see if any of our audio folks have an answer of how they would use PTP, and we'll go from there. Or ask it again tomorrow, and we'll see what we can do there. We don't usually try to pass that off, but I think that one's vertical enough that we would probably need our audio team to answer that. Next question.
Next one from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. It's hard to count all the ChatGPT and AI get rich and how to videos on YouTube. Have you found any great sources of info that aren't just hustles, and what areas is AI excelling the most?
Go ahead, John.
I get the same thing. I'm getting tons of this stuff. And what's happening is it's going to morph. It's going to be ubiquitous. It's going to disappear. AI is going to disappear into all the applications we use on a daily basis. So I can't wait for Adobe to integrate it into Photoshop in multiple layers so that I can go in and edit the stuff we get out of Midjourney. Hopefully they buy Midjourney and then create layers into Photoshop. That would be great.
I don't know if they can afford Midjourney at this point. At 8 million, users and number of paid, I think that I bet you the value of Midjourney, I think now is already at 10 billion. With the last investment from Microsoft, and it's just going to keep going. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So, Paul, you haven't asked ChatGPT how to get rich on your site. My suggestion is to actually just ask for do a different type of search. So for ChatGPT, I like to search on commands or how you use commands to cultivate whatever you're going to say on ChatGPT or Midjourney. I've been going through a lot of commands on Midjourney to make things, finding out about foregrounds and backgrounds and priorities. Those are the things that you really want to do. So you can create a list so you can cultivate your answers or your questions a lot easier.
Yeah, I think that I have found it to be extremely powerful for doing keynote documents. I'm getting very good at I did say earlier that you should say flat white background, but I get too many cups of coffee. If you say flat white, it doesn't mean anything to most Americans. But if you're in Australia or the UK, it does. And so you'll get this thing over a flat white background, and you'll end up with a coffee cup somewhere. I was like, why is everybody drinking coffee? Like everywhere I go, people are drinking coffee. And so the flat white, but plain white background works really well. And so a lot of times what I do is I want this thing in front of a plain white background, or over plain white background is like my last term. And I get all this stuff that I can just cut out and put into my documents. And it's a lot of fun. I'm working on a big Keynote document right now. And I don't know if I've ever had so much fun building a document, because I'm not sitting there trying to dig through iStock photo. I'm just sitting there just giving it a couple terms and then finding something. And most of them are, the other thing that I've really started to enjoy is in the style of Pixar, or as a Pixar character. So I want this to do it in the style of Pixar. And then I get in the style of Pixar over white, and you get this unique, like a person doing the thing, and it's just a lot of fun. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Do they have a room full of people that fix exceptions? Because, something that big and that popular has to have certain unexpected results, and they have to sort of patch it.
It has lots of results, and you can patch it. Just go into Photoshop. I don't know if they have a big room that does that. I think that the computer just pushes stuff out, and it has too many fingers, sometimes multiple pupils. It has trouble with glasses, although it's getting better at glasses. Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think the tensor model does use human reinforcement and correction. It uses reward and punishment to make its choices and get better and learn. Never want to have Midjourney or DALL-E design gloves for you, because it would be a disaster.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think I figured out what causes that problem with hands with too many fingers is because of the confusion. Remember, it's a text token based to image based model, so it uses text tokens or labels for things. And you think of your hand. Your hand is referred to as having 5 fingers a lot of the time, but you really only have 4 fingers and a thumb. The thumb is both the finger and a thumb. So, high five, give me 5, 5-finger discount. So those things that when it sees hand, when it comes to drawing a hand, it goes, okay, 5 fingers. And so it draws 5 fingers and then the thumb. So it always adds 6 fingers total, or 5 fingers and a thumb.
If it only did 6 fingers, I'd be super happy.
If there wasn't one growing out of the middle of your palm, the opposite direction.
I have, sometimes it's 12 fingers, sometimes it's 2 layers of fingers, like it'll have fingers under fingers. And so, it's all over the place. So, I think that the other thing that I will say that ChatGPT, a lot of coders I know are using it to just get ideas for what they're doing. They're not trying to actually do. They say rarely does it give you the code that is perfectly clean, but if you know what you're looking at, if you know what you're doing, that oftentimes it'll pop up and it'll pop you up something. Oh, that's good, and it's generally very clean. It just makes a couple errors, and they fix those, and then they said it's saving them a lot of time. Like it's not like a minor amount of time. There's some people that are writing whole apps with it just as a test. And then there are other people who are, people have now written books using Midjourney and ChatGPT. I find them very fun to do. Fortune cookies. We were talking about fortune cookies earlier, but fortune cookies are a fun thing to do, like fortune cookies as a Romulan, fortune cookies as for the Empire, or the rebels, and you get an entirely different set, and it's good fun. People enjoy it a lot. So I think that there's a lot of things, but I will say that a lot of people are trying to figure out how to make business out of it, and I'll say that a lot of times I find that it is more about, like, for instance, I was talking about somebody talking on a mic. So this is the like, just to give you a sense of the kind of illustrations that I do for my thing. I wanted this for a presentation, and there he is. So that's a guy with glasses talking into a mic in the style of Pixar. So over a plain white background. And if you want some kind of illustration, like, I could never find that illustration, and if you find some certain style and use it for all the search terms, it ties in the consistency of your entire presentation. It's pretty fun. So I would look less at how to make money with it and more how to just use it on a daily basis. Next question.
Next question in from Douglas Carmichael. One thing I've read about the 14-inch MacBook Pro versus the 16-inch MacBook Pro is that the sharp edge of the keyboard can press into the bottom of one's hands, especially those with larger hands. Has anyone else had that experience?
Go, Jason.
This is one of these insanely subjective things that I really wouldn't give much credence to. I can tell you straight away that the keys on the 14 versus the 16th to the 100th of a millimeter are exactly the same, completely and exactly the same. So what that means is someone is using it and their hand is just in the right place and they find it uncomfortable. That doesn't mean anything.
Next question.
From Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. What is your preferred way to use Apple Motion with something like SPX? Seems like they complement, but not sure a smooth way of integrating the rendered animation with the dynamic features.
You can, so generally I would use SPX on its own and have, but if you want something that's more complex, so where this might be the case is I want a more complex animation than I can do easily in SPX. And what you would do is you'd render that out with an alpha channel and then you'd fire that off to play. And then what you have to do is you just have to know that your animation is out of the way before the text that is dynamic is rolling up. So you have a basic background that's there, and you could either slide that in or play it out. But SPX should be able to play a video out with alpha, and then you just have to time it. We've done this a lot with both Motion and After Effects in other areas where we have a graphic system play it out with an alpha channel, and then we lay the text is dynamic, but the background is a known animation. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I would love to have Tuomo prove me wrong, but I'm not really certain that SPX can play a video file. Do we know this for a fact?
I think it can. I guess I'm extending it because I know that Casper was able to do that, so I don't know.
So what I would do, Morgan, is think of the two tools. Well, at least in my mind, and I could be totally wrong. I've been wrong about many things. I think of the two tools as like authoring tools. I can pick up my crayons and I can draw some very interesting thing with my crayons. I can pick up my charcoal and I can draw some very interesting things with charcoal. I can't make charcoal drawings with my crayons and I can't make crayon drawings with my charcoal, but I could do very interesting things with both. SPX is using a whole, HTML tool set to draw and create and color and stuff. Motion's has its own island. I don't know, and I should. You know what? I'm gonna just turn my mic off.
I am 95% certain that it can play out a video with an alpha channel. And if it can, then you can render very complex things inside of it with highlights and all kinds of stuff. But we'll have to reach out to Tuomo. But I know that Casper CG could definitely do that. It's been able to do that for a decade. So we would have to take a look at whether it can do it. But I think that you would render out the bottom layer, and then you would have the dynamic stuff come over, and that's just timing to make sure the bottom layer is opened and visible, and you don't have text going off the end and that type of thing. Next question.
Next question in from Hasmut Gajar in Cape Town, South Africa. I'm in the midst of creating very short lab-style videos. Some office hours community interested in how I use Here to Record with gallery position and Zoom ISO to auto-insert with gallery position participant name as a lower third in a super source. How would the panel approach this undertaking?
Yeah, I think that I guess the thing that when I do short form, I guess what I would say is that I don't think about doing it live. So when I do live, I do live. When I do short form, I generally want to cut that much tighter because as a viewer, I'm very particular about what I'm watching. And so if someone does a live thing, I don't really want, when people say I'm going to cover something live, I usually don't. I usually assume that, unless it's discussing it like the way we do it here, unless we're in a discussion and we're covering it and I'm going to put it on in the background somewhere, I don't want to watch anybody do anything live because it's too slow. And so I want, for an ongoing discussion, for us to have, to look at it and to answer questions and if I want that kind of experience in the background while I'm driving or something, that's fine. But if you do it short, now you're in this position where I am watching something and I do want that information. doing it live almost never works for me. Like I need you to, cut this, cut that, and then tighten it all up to make it all work. And I think I would rather build a pipeline around that than to try to do lots of things cut live. I see a lot of people try to do kind of one takes on these kinds of things, and I just don't find it very compelling. Go ahead, Chris.
This just in. I stand corrected. You are correct. Tuomo says it absolutely can play back a video file.
There you go. Unconnected to the current question, but breaking news. Breaking news. Chris.
Breaking news.
Chris was wrong. I think that I'm going
to leave my mic off and let you run the show.
I think we need to have a breaking news, that comes in from SPX. It goes breaking news. Chris was incorrect. Anyway, so anyway,
created with motion.
Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Bob Sturtevant in Nairobi, Kenya, asking what software would the panel recommend to do the things MixFX Pro does, but with A10 Mini Pro ISO, since it doesn't do super sources?
Go ahead, Jason.
I've yet to find an ATEM switcher that I don't like using MixFX Pro with. So I would stick with that one. It does a great job.
Go, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I don't see too much. I mean, we have Central Command that helps with getting that. That's a pace program right there. And of course, there is technically one super source in a ATEM Mini Pro ISO, and that just takes a lot of work to get that super source to work properly.
Well, I don't think there's not really any good way. You're going to need there's not a good way to make a Mac Mini Pro do a super source. I mean, it can do a DVE, but it doesn't. There's not any clean way to do it because it needs those inputs so live. So I think that is. I mean, I think that's a limitation of the switcher, not so much MixFX Pro. MixFX Pro still could be valuable in the video follows audio that we talked about earlier. You can do a lot of other controls to it, so you might use something like that, but you can't. MixFX Pro isn't limited. It's the Mini Pro that doesn't have the processing power to do what you're trying to do. So there's nothing that could get it to do it. You'd have to have those inputs independently, and at that point, you might as well do something like Mimo Live or OBS or Ecamm or vMix. Those are all things that can do all of those things. So if you're looking for a super source and you're not going to use an Extreme, then the next step you're going into software and deciding which one you want to use. Next question.
From Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, is something like the Fenwick Framer available for home use, and is the Fenwick Framer available as open source?
Chris, have you open sourced the Fenwick Framer, or is there a royalty payment involved?
No, we're putting it on. What's that thing called, John? Where you sell stuff?
Oh,
Etsy?
Etsy.
No, it's not Etsy.
No, it's the NFTs.
Yeah, it's an NFT.
OpenSea.
There's a very few of them available.
Exactly.
The bidding is pretty crazy.
You have to use the Charles Schwab music. That stupid thing you keep playing.
I'm trying to retire on this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Chris thought that editing was going to be his thing. It just turned out framers, and yeah, that's going to be the thing. Lower Fenwicks and framers. That's going to be his big business. Fenwick at large. Yeah. Next question.
Next question from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. They made a laptop, but with 2 Mac Minis and an Extreme ISO switcher. Crazy or crazy useful? Thinking instead of a flight case, just adding legs.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So, and this is the question that was asked yesterday. It's a very interesting build. They wanted to put a larger screen on a laptop. So they took a 32-inch monitor and then they created a case around it. And of course, they put in the 2 Mac Minis I'm assuming, so you could switch back and forth between the two and double the process. I love the idea. When I go traveling, I take my Mac Mini and my MacBook Pro. The MacBook Pro becomes the connection to the Mac Mini with a Wi-Fi router in play there. That way I can start everything on the Mac Mini and then just disconnect the MacBook Pro and do other work as you go. So it's very useful, but that system would probably not be able to check onto a plane. It's way too heavy with all the wood that they have in there. It's just, too heavy.
Go ahead, Courtney.
And what about power? Mac Minis have AC power supplies that are built in. There's no DC inputs on them. So I don't know what you'd do for battery power to make it into a super laptop. You'd have to carry around, a deep discharge marine battery, 12 volt, and then hack the Mac Minis to get by the power supply.
I think they're just being absurd. I don't think they're planning to take it anywhere. I think they just if you get to like 17 minutes and 44, you get kind of the full level of insanity that they have there. I don't think that the goal is to. I doubt it's to take it anywhere. I think it was just to build a very absurd video, which I think that they did very effectively. I don't know why you would do this, but it's all the limitations of a laptop with none of the advantages. So, in my opinion, I think they just made a great video. They got 650,000 views in 3 days. So I think that was the most useful part of that video, and I think that they did a great job. Next question.
From Samuel Nordvik in Norway, Samuel asked, is there a way to output 3840 by 1080 from a Mac Mini M1 to the LG 42.5 quad display?
I don't think so. You would have to probably output it as quads itself to do. Well, it wouldn't be quads either. It would be you putting out as a dual output. So you would need a dual output that is left and right. I guess the way that you would do that, and I don't know if it might work, if you had two outputs from your Mac Mini, and you had them right next to each other, and you put them into two of the outputs there. The problem is that if it does it have two inputs? Like I don't know the LG, but theoretically, if you had a left and a right, and you put it into a dual monitor, and it was designed to show different monitors, it should just be one big wide one that is 3840 by 1080. Should work. Works in my head. So if it's got two monitor outputs, and you take two monitor outputs from if it has two monitor inputs, if that's how that one is designed, and I'm making this up because I've never used the LG. But if it's got two inputs, you should be able to just take two outputs from your Mac Mini. It'd be one of them is a USB to HDMI, and the other one's the HDMI, and you plug them into that LG. But if it's a quad display, it seems like it wants to be a 16 by 9, and so it has to be a widescreen. So it would have to be a widescreen to do that. Yeah, yeah. Next question.
From Hasma Kajar, Cape Town, South Africa. Hasma asks, I used 2 Stream Deck XLs in my medical event. I did not go to the Amazon cart for the Stream Deck Plus to complete a hesitant purchase. For those who have the Plus, would you recommend that? I cry once again.
Go ahead, Jason.
So the dials are a very specific use case, and if you don't find yourself needing to make a lot of switching very quickly, that's really what dials are for. So if you're not finding yourself missing it, I don't think you're really going to have much added to your production.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I agree. The one problem that I have with the Stream Deck Plus is the dials are on the bottom. I'd like to see them on the top. In fact, I would love to see a Stream Deck device that is just dials that I can put right on top of my 15 button or my 32 button, because I like to have the dials above it. I always find that I'm kind of scraping a hand when I'm trying to get to the Stream Deck, getting to those buttons. So I'd like to see that rather than having that design or a way to flip it around. That would be really helpful for me.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
There's another issue with the Stream Deck Plus that is kind of interesting. The 8 buttons that are there are a completely different scale than all your other Stream Decks. They're close together vertically. They're far apart horizontally, which means they're not on a real, like a square grid. And they're larger. And I got to say, the knob thing, I don't use it. I could see why some people do, but I don't use them hardly at all.
Yeah, if you think that there's some kind of volume or some kind of thing that you'd want to control with those knobs, I think that it would be valuable, but you have to think through it. And I have it. I have to admit, I haven't used it as much as I thought I would. So I got it and I was like, okay, this is going to be great. And it kind of sits there and I go, well, I got to figure out exactly what I'm going to do with that. And I just haven't done that. So it hasn't been as useful as I thought it would be. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Well, for the dials, and this is especially for gamers, you can actually set up multiple sound. Like, for instance, on Windows, I can have my zoom and my main sound, two different audio devices. And for me to actually switch between the two, I'd either have to go into Zoom and change the speakers, or change the volume of the speakers, and then go to the speaker panel to do the main. With these dials, you can set them all so you can have them, one go to Spotify, one go to Zoom, one go to your main audio. But that doesn't work that way on a Mac.
And I think that there's, while the encoders aren't the highest quality, those of us that are used to, in the dials that are used to higher quality and higher resolution encoders, these aren't the best ones. I will say there are things that you go, well, on a Stream Deck, I'd be hitting arrow up, or arrow down, and that's kind of annoying in some cases. So I do think that there are places where those encoders, even at the resolution that they're at, would be useful. And I have all of them, and I'm kind of figuring out in my next configuration for the desk of where they're all going to go. Haven't quite figured that out yet. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, asking, Stanberg Bowden Progressive is a guitar like no other. No head, ergonomic. Why has it taken so long for a new guitar design?
Go ahead, Javier.
I think it taken so long because it's a design that has 500 years, and it works great. It sounds like the way it's supposed to sound. So I think the first part is tradition. A lot of musicians and guitar makers are this is the classic design of the guitars. The second part, I think, is it's very hard to string it, to tune it, and to, especially if something happens on stage, you can't change strings easily. I remember the first time I bought a guitar with a complex tremolo system, and I tried to tune it and to change all the strings and everything. It was a nightmare for me. So I think the kind of designs may work in some scenarios, and they look very great. And if you see a guitar player with this in stage, you're gonna remember it because they're few and apart. So most people use it like that, because a aesthetic statement more than a useful instrument. They look cool, but they are not that easy to use, especially the technique tuning it in and setting up.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Javier hit it. I would imagine tuning it requires a tool. So if you don't have a guitar tech who's at the edge of the stage ready to hand you a new one that's in tune when it goes out or it pops a string, I wouldn't use one of these in a live performance.
Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. Chris asked, short of using an ATEM Extreme, what would the panel recommend for an 8-source multi-view to a 4K large display?
Go ahead, Jason.
You're not going to like the answer. Blackmagic Multiview 16, which costs easily as much money, will do this very nicely.
Yeah, and it won't be 8 because you really have to, to do it, it has to be 1x1, 2x2, 3x3, 4x4. So really that you're talking about 9 sources that you would need to go into that. So it's 1, 4, 9, 16 are the ones that are going to fit into that as a super source. And so, or not a super source, but as an 8-source multi-view. So yeah, and the best one, as Jason said, is that as far as I don't know of any 9-source ones or 16-source ones for HDMI. So you can definitely get 4x, a 4x4 can be gotten, or 2x2, so 4 up. Is about $250 on Monoprice. so those are doable. And there's lots of those. But 8 or 9, I haven't seen, other than you'd get right to the multi-view, or you'd find another piece of hardware that costs as much as a multi-view. So that's the thing. Next question.
Robin Cutshaw is here from Atlanta, Georgia, asking, with the X Dante cards back in stock for the X32, I'm thinking about how I'll design the X32 integration with my network. How do you use your Dante attached X32? Could we do a lab?
I think doing a lab would be great. We have all of our X32s, so we get a lot of X32 racks, and all of them. I mean, I don't buy one until I know I can get the Dante card, and we've got a host of them in there, and so I mean that's how we're using them. I think we have right now 2 of them in the office hours kit. One that Mickey runs, and one that I'm fiddling with a little bit, and so those are there. So there's a they're basically that's your engine. It goes in and out. There's no analog, or it can be. You can add some analog if you want to the X32. But I think doing a lab would make a lot of sense. Next question.
Hasmut Gajar, Cape Town, South Africa. Hasmut asked, Twit has many shows. Leo mentioned that Alex did a lab on Midjourney on one of the Twit shows some 3 weeks back. I know I can Google for the show, but Alex, tell us.
I think it went into some of the Twit extras. So if you're a member of Twit, I think it's in there somewhere. I think that's where they put those videos, and I don't know. I actually don't know where those videos are. I think that it was part of the tech or the new show that Leo's doing that I can't remember the name of right now. That was the tech guy. So that was the. But I think it was a couple Sundays back, and I just recorded it. I'll probably record another one for our channel sometime soon, only because, that one was pretty good, but I've done a lot since then as well. And so, but that it's a good little intro to show you how that works. But I think that, I think it's in some custom part of Twit. And I will admit, I have a hard time doing, VODs. It's easy I can do live every morning, as many of you have seen. But doing VODs, even just something short, my forward error correction in my head goes to 11, and it's very hard for me to put something out. So that would take a long time, and I still wasn't happy with it. So anyway, but I think a lot of people seem to like it. So check that out. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas has a question, kind of a follow-up. Will ChatGPT help you with Unix and Linux system administration and shell scripting?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I use it right now for the SQL scripts for the OH database. It writes my SQL scripts perfect. So yes, I think it does right now 48 different languages, which a lot of people don't know. You can ask it a question and then have it print out in one of 48 different languages, which is amazing. And then I think it supports right now 15 or 18 different programming languages.
And if you have any other questions, we've got a couple more minutes before the top of the hour. Yeah, I think that you're going to find that it helps with a lot of those things. Again, right now, I would say that you have to be pretty advanced to use it. And the reason for that is if you can't just I don't know Unix, so write me a shell, because it's still making a lot of errors. So it's very error prone. And so I think that you'd have a hard time having it write something for somebody that doesn't know what they're looking at. That said, I think talking to programmers, it seems like a lot of people are getting a lot of productivity out of it, because it will write it can write a lot of code very, very fast in a way that might take you, again, it's not that you will use it, you will not cut and paste it verbatim, but you'll look at it and it might write something that would have taken you an hour or two. This is how it was told to me anyway, that something that might take an hour or two to write, it'll write in 15 seconds. And then it takes a little, and the reality is that it takes a couple minutes to fix it. This variable's wrong, or this wouldn't work, or something like that. But it ends up being half an hour instead of 2 hours. And that's they're not saying that it's nothing, like it's just doing it all by itself, but it's 3, 4, 5 times faster to do it with ChatGPT. Now, obviously, there's some sensitivity to that, because the companies don't want you to just throw important code into the cloud. So I think it's really working for people who are don't have a lot of data to protect as well. I think that's one of the challenges as well. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Proto, I'm curious, it can write a well-formed query for SQL? That's amazing.
100%. I'm doing one right now for Fenwick, every time Fenwick was a host.
I had it right, and I haven't implemented it yet. But I have a complaint about the Apple iPhone that I want to shoot in 48 megapixels, and I don't want it to automatically shift down. I want it to always shoot 48 megapixels, and so I just asked ChatGPT. I said, write me a program that will an application that will do this, and I want it to always be 48 there, and I said in the language of Swift. And it just wrote an app, and I sent it to a friend of mine that does more programming than I do, and he's like, "Yeah, that would work." There's a couple things I'd fix in there, but and it was so it is, so you can tell it Swift, you can tell it now. The problem you have is that the model was built 2 years ago, so any of the updates or new libraries or other things aren't there. So it works great with more stable. Swift is probably not the best thing to use, because it's a fast growing library. But something like Python or Unix or Linux, you'd probably be able to get 99% of the capacity out of it. So it's pretty interesting. Next question.
Next one in from Douglas Carmichael. Douglas asks, when I tried out a 14-inch MacBook Pro at an Apple store, it's always a drastic adjustment for my eyes and posture. coming from a 15-inch MacBook Pro. I've been standing up when I've evaluated it. Would the change be less drastic from a seated position?
Go ahead, Jason.
That depends. Do you usually use your 15-inch MacBook Pro seated or standing? If you're not using it the way that you're testing it, then it's kind of a moot point.
Next question.
David Brady, New York, asking, when rack mounting Blackmagic Design mini converters, how do you do it? Can they be screw mounted vertically, or do you dual lock them flat to a shelf?
Go ahead, Jason.
They screw mount in from the bottom, but the trick with them is that you never, ever, ever put 3 in a rack unless you want at least 2 out of those 3 to burn out. So if you've got 2 racks,
now
then
you're talking about
do
the
one, skip one.
Are you talking about the recorders or these are the mini converters, like the little boxes?
Oh, the tiny ones. Oh, okay. Yeah. What is it? Somebody makes a vertical, that'll stack them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way to go. B&H.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
A little thing of Velcro on the back of them. Pop them right on the side of the rack.
Mitchell, go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I thought he was talking about the third width rack type converters, the mini Teranex, because they do have a bracket that you can buy from them that will take 3 up into a 1RU rack piece. It's a metal rack, and then they screw in from the bottom, and they're designed to, as Jason said, the fans are on the sides of those third rack units, and they're designed to pass air from left to right or right to left. I can't remember which direction, but you got to make sure that the output of the last one is open and not blocked by anything, and the input of the first one on the right is not blocked by anything, because the airflow goes through them and out to the left, which means that the one that's on the output side gets all the heat from the other 2, so it's probably going to be the first one to fail.
Yeah, and there are quite a few options in MarkerTech that will do these things, and so you want to probably take a look there. You can stack them vertically. These little converters, this is the mini micro converter HDMI to SDI here. There is one that will actually take these, and it'll actually screw these. There's like a whole rack length of these that'll go in and out. That are available as well that you can put into a rack. You can there's a lot of different ones that'll rack them vertically. Some are horizontal. I never quite understood the horizontal part. You do want to space them out a little bit. They do create heat, so stacking them right up against each other is not a good idea. And once you start building this density, you want to start thinking about a distro. So how do you provide direct DC to them from a single PDU? As opposed to and I think Mitchell, Courtney, that's not what he's asking about. I think he's asking about the converters, but but you want to have something that is, because what'll happen is you're now generating an enormous number of wall words right next to each other. So think about a centralized DC distribution to back to those. Next question.
Next question in from Ike Potter in Hanover, Germany. Any new dates ahead for a lab in after hours on making your own SDI BNC cables?
No dates right now. I will say that I decided to kind of take one thing at a time, and so we're finishing 2.5, and there's folks that are doing labs, and we're kind of getting ready for NAB. We now have 20 people signed up for NAB, and so we're kind of focused on those things. And I'm trying to get the second hours. For those watching, I think we talked about this on Sunday. The second hour is a lot of work, so I'm trying to get those under control, and so that we push their horizon events away from us, and then we can start. Then you're going to see more labs as those second hours become stabilized. Next question.
Henry Ramos in Yonkers, New York, asking, currently using Business Sims different carriers in my PepLink unit, but I recall hearing about another option, Telco or something similar. Would you recommend for occasional use?
We generally use the different SIMs, for that. That is the way we do it. You want to not necessarily, I don't know of anyone else. There's Mr. Net. I don't know if that's what you're looking at that can do some of that for you, but that's doing what you're doing. So I would stick with the multiple SIMs. Next question.
Bob Sturdivant from Nairobi, Kenya, asking, is there a good travel UPS that can handle 120 volts or 240 that can be put into a checked baggage?
Not that I know of. Like it is, UPS there's just so much going on when it comes to power that it really needs to be 120 or 240. I've been buying a lot of them. I've never seen one that will switch well. Go ahead, Courtney.
You might be able to get away with it with the APCs, the smaller versions, if you disconnect, because they have lead acid batteries, which I think are allowed to be in checked luggage. If it
I
has
don't
a
think it's
lead acid,
being allowed. I think it's the issue is that they just won't. You can't do 120 in a 240 environment, or vice versa.
that's true. Yeah, it doesn't handle the input. The output has to be a dual voltage inverter, which they don't exist. I don't think.
Yeah, and they get it's pretty exciting when you plug the UP. I can tell you from personal experience when you plug a 120 into a 240 outlet, super exciting. Gets really smoky, really fast. so anyway, so I would highly recommend against it's the one place you really have to pay attention. Hair dryers, bug zappers for Africa, and your UPSs. Next question.
Next question is from Robin Cutshaw in Atlanta, Georgia. I installed the noise assist in my MixPre 6. When I go to turn on advanced mode to use it, the mic audio levels go to 0 and changing levels does nothing. Is there a magic sauce?
I don't know what the answer to that. I mean, advanced mode and use it, the mic audio goes to 0. Well, you want to click on the source. So make sure that you're clicking, you want to push in the volume button to click on that source and make sure you see where the gain is. So that it may have something to do with that. Also, make sure that it's activated for that channel, and also make sure that it's I think, but it may be the input gain for the channel that you're doing. So you push in the volume button, you'll see it there in the upper left, and you got to turn that to where you need it to go to get something back. I think when you go into advanced mode, I think that's probably what's getting you. Next question.
Asma Gajar in Cape Town, South Africa has a question. I've been asked to produce YouTube live streams of the KSI Karate World Champs in July in Cape Town. 6 mats, and they say audio is not important. Really? Come with Brios? Really? Who in community can provide great advice?
Well, not them. So I think that you definitely are going to need to be able to follow things around. I think that that's someone who doesn't have a lot of imagination, doesn't want to spend a lot of money for anything where people are hitting the mats. I would definitely have a shotgun or two that are pointed at the mat, so that you get those impacts. So I think that would be pretty useful. So I think that it's just a matter of what you have a budget for. So you'd want to have obviously operatable cameras. I think you could get away with something on a budget of like the Insta360 Lynx, where you could kind of reframe things. You stay with a wider shot. I think they're just thinking that they're moving around a lot, and you're not going to get a close up. But I think that you might want a wider shot for each one of those, and maybe a lot of times you do these things in passes. You do it the first time and you just see what happened. Like you just do it. The problem you're going to have with USB cameras is you got 6 mats, they're really far apart, and how do you get that video signal around? So having an SDI signal is going to make it a lot easier to convert that and move it over a long distance back to wherever you want to stream it. Otherwise, you're going to have little computers next to every mat, which will be not great. All right. We are changing subjects, and we're very excited to have Ross here to talk about the folks from Ross, Matt, Marion, and Bo Cordell here we know some Rosses. That's what I suddenly realized. But we're really, really, really excited to have them here talking about dashboard. And I'm going to let Bo give us a little bit of an introduction to that, and then Matt to jump in. Go ahead, Bo.
Yeah. Thanks for having us back. We thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about Dashboard. So Dashboard's a free piece of software that Ross Video put out that, it's kind of operates, we use it as kind of that single pane of glass for operators. So it can control any number of, computers, machines, switchers, routers. Matt's done a lot of crazy things. I know we've controlled, water fountains and lights and all kind of things at different stadiums with it. So yeah, me and Matt both work for Ross Video. We work for Rocket Surgery, which is kind of the creative services division of Ross. And Matt, I'll let you tell him a little bit about you and your team.
All right, so I'm Matt Marion. I work with Rocket Surgery. So my department is triggering control. So we do mostly dashboard stuff. So basically, you got a stadium, you got a studio, you've got a theater, you got an event center. We'll build you a dashboard to control it. So basically, whatever you need to do. So some places it's just a graphic shot box. Sometimes we have full blinds and projector screens and projectors and you name it. So that's one of the cool things about dashboard is it's basically lets you build a nice, easy to build UI, and you've got TCP connections you can make, which right there is the meat and potatoes of everything. If you can connect to it over TCP, you can control it. So like you can have an event center, you walk in, you push a button, all the blinds come up, the projector screens go down, the audio turns on, the house lights come on, the stage lights come on. So we have like EOS control. Like any device that has TCP API, as long as you know a bit of JavaScript, you can go in there and write yourself up an API for it. So it's pretty cool software, especially since it's free. And you don't need to know your UI stuff. That's the key.
What's the business model for making it free? Like, why do you do that?
Quite honestly, I have no idea why they originally made it free. I came in and I thought that was kind of crazy, but we make our money in rocket surgery, my department, so you can contract me to build one. And I think it's like $1,750 a day US, and we'll build a panel for you. So, I mean, it can save a lot of time and money in the end. So it saves people a lot of money, but
oh yeah.
For anyone, you can just download it for free. I think that was kind of the point of it, and it lets people use it. Yeah. It's the whole Photoshop thing. A lot of people, they got Photoshop, not necessarily paid for it, and now they're huge Photoshop fans and they're buying licenses left, right, and center. So I think it's kind of one of those things. If you give it, they will come.
Yeah, absolutely. John, did you have a question?
Yes, I'm very disappointed in Mr. Doug Ferguson, who's a Ross user that is not with us today. Can we kick him off the island, Alex?
Yeah, exactly. So can you, Matt, give us a little overview of how do you get started with it?
Actually, both. You could do a little demo there.
Yeah, I can do a little demo. Yeah, we can kind of talk through. I can do a little demo. We can talk through any questions and whatnot as we go. But basically, if you open up Dashboard, you get essentially a blank canvas. So that should be what you're seeing on your screen right now.
Yep, we see it.
I'm just going to go into Panel Builder Edit mode. And because I'm doing it this way, it's going to be complicated. No, here we go. Panel Builder Edit mode. Hold on. Yeah. Of course, the demo is wonky. I'll come back to that in just a minute. But basically, you start out with a blank canvas. You have all the tools to make tabs and buttons, and there is a bit of a node-based component. So you can kind of drag in blocks. They call it visual logic or visual scripting, but you can drag in blocks for TCP commands, for UDP commands, and control. Like Matt said, it's kind of got a JavaScript backend. So if you know JavaScript, you can build your own functions. If not, you can just kind of use the ones that are pre-built, and you can go as simple or as complex as you want. So I'll show you that in just a few minutes.
And when you say you can build your own functions, can you build kind of your own library that you could share with other people? Like these are the build your own nodes essentially that you're gonna work from.
Yeah, exactly. So, for instance, Jonas has put out like a Zoom ISO, TypeScript library. We were able to bring that in. So I've been able to control Zoom ISO using Dashboard. I've been able to control, Blackmagic, deck links, hyperdeck. There's really not a limit to what you can control. Like I'm controlling my LG, a lot of us have those 4K LG displays that have the RS-232, jack on it. So I'm running that through a TCP to serial converter, and I'm controlling my LG TV using Dashboard. So there's, there really isn't a limit to it.
And how would you do something like, so a lot of us use OSC to pass things back and forth between a lot of our gear. How would you go from Dashboard to get it to OSC? What would you use to translate that? Do you have it? Do you know?
I can come here if you want. So
yeah, go
OSC
for it, Matt.
is. Do you guys mind if I share my screen? Just show
absolutely.
You some stuff here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Might as well. All right, share. All right, so you guys can see this. It's a dashboard. So this is Dashboard. So you can see at the top here. So this is what I have to control my room. I'm in the middle of moving my room from my house to the office because I don't need it in the house anymore. So I had a whole event center / TV studio in my house. So here, and this is kind of squished. It's supposed to be in full screen. So for example, here we've got like Azure control at the top. So key pro. So I could start, stop my key pro. Here I've got lighting. So this is EOS. So I'm just using EOS, etc. And that's actually, it's on a touch screen that's beside me. So you can see my face kind of turned a little purple there. So I'm like turning my lights up and down. I've got a joystick that controls my PTZ camera. If you look back there, there's a Samsung camera or a Panasonic camera up there. So I've got a joystick that controls that, all tied through here. And
how's the joystick tied through this to the camera?
And so the joystick. So watch this. So this is what I was going to show you guys. So if you go into here, this is a pretty complicated panel. But for example, these are APIs. API is just a tag you could put in, and then you put JavaScript. So OSC, you're asking, well,
it's just built
go
in.
through, figure out what OSC does, make a TCP listener, write up some JavaScript, and you can get an OSC. Or just ask Bo or me, and we could even just give you the OSC parser.
Right.
I use this one a lot. A lot of things use OSC.
Yeah.
So this is just JavaScript to be able to send the bytes out in the format that OSC takes.
Mm-hmm.
You can also use intermediate things. So forget what it's called, but there's that thing you can get that's you log into the website, it gives you a bunch of buttons. You can program the buttons to do pretty much anything. They can also be triggered. What's it called? I don't know, but here's the OS. So for example, same thing. This sends EOS commands. EOS use OSC. So I've got my my EOS set up so I can do my lighting. I've got a LED. Here's the PTZ. This is the joystick. So I just wrote myself like this nice big long joystick control over it. So joysticks just load in dashboard. You can just plug one in USB. PlayStation joystick, like I'm using the Thrustmaster flight yoke. You can plug anything into it you want. It'll work. I just wrote this big long thing because I wanted to have, I don't know, I'm a programmer. I just do that.
Right.
Things like ITAC. So this is just a relay. I think Bo just mentioned that. It's literally a relay. You turn it on or off. It connects over Ethernet, and yeah, you can just turn things on and off. I have normally my lights and stuff hooked up to it, but not quite yet. And here's a fun one that's built into this one. I don't have it working right now. I actually have a demo room kind of set up where I have a little projector screen, but it's actually just a 12-volt motor, and I make it go up and down. And again, through dashboard, it's just triggering a relay. So I start the motor, it goes up, stop the motor. So fire alarm is a fun one. It's an example of push one button, have a lot of things happen. Graphics come on the screen that tell you to go away. Projector screen goes up, blinds go up, lights turn to like house lights turn to light. Or to white and everything. So you could pile a bunch of stuff. And to what Bo was saying earlier, so for example, if I make a new file, sure, I'll put it in my motorsports thing. So if I make a new file and I want a button, I now have a button. I can give it a name. And I can add a task. And I've got all those functions that I made somewhere in here. Or I can pull in, I don't have any devices or anything, but I can switch to JavaScript, for example, and I can do stuff. Blah, 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 blah. And it's a lot easier with a mouse. And you can add a task to a button. And now if I want to use this button for anything, if I put useful stuff in there instead of just,
right,
yeah, I can now do it. So it's that fast to make a button. And I mean, so you set up your APIs, you get APIs. There's also visual. I think I turned it off. Oh no, there's visual there. Oh, but it's disabled. I'm a programmer.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
I think Bo uses a lot of the visual more so. But
Bo, did you get your?
Yeah. I got ahead of myself and was trying to edit a file that I hadn't created yet. So I figured,
awesome.
figured that out. Yeah. So
like here, if I want to open a file for reading, boom, put in the path.
Right.
So now this button will now do a bunch of gobbledygook from that first task, and it will open up a button.
Right.
So it's that easy to just build a boom. And you can go all the way up to, for example, this.
And so that's actually the whole thing is running inside of it.
this is running in dashboard, a whole bunch of layers of PNGs and stuff with a little dude running around the middle. And you can actually open up the little treasure chests and everything. I won't get into it, but and yeah, like you can make simple things like keep rows. This is a double keep row panel. So there's a lot of fun you can do with it. Here,
That's really cool.
Unshare.
It's great.
There we go.
And then we'll jump.
Yeah, so that's like we use it for a lot of complicated stuff like broadcast environments, studios, and everything.
Yep.
But I mean, a lot of the customers even come down to sometimes like one person shows. We've got like house of worship places. A lot of them, they don't have the hugest budget, but they also like to do things themselves. They really like to teach their people to do things. Dashboard, perfect. You just download it, start programming, build your things up.
Right.
Like you're good to go. Like, and I mean, no matter what level you're on, like Bo said, like I actually wrote up a thing. I started writing it up to control the heat in my house,
right?
The thermostat, because I can connect to it over the network.
Yeah.
So why not? I mean,
no, absolutely.
Anyway, I'll shut up.
And it's just a little, and it's just like a little PC. You could use like a little, like one of those, just a tiny NUC.
Yeah, it's cross-platform. I run it on the little, B-Link. I've got several B-Links. It doesn't run great on a Raspberry Pi. It's close, but
yeah.
I mean, it's cross-platform, Windows, Linux, Mac. It's easy to run. I've run it in the cloud a good bit. Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty lightweight.
Did you want us to show? Are you ready to jump back to?
Yeah, I mean, I can just quickly. I'll just kind of quickly punch through. So now that I have a file open, so go into edit mode, just like Matt was talking about. I'll actually start with a tab. I normally start with tabs to keep things clean. I'll create a couple of tabs here, just so we now have different canvases.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so there's an NDI widget. So if I drag out an NDI widget, I've actually got a multi-viewer that I'm streaming right now that should pop in as soon as NDI catches up. Yep, so there's a multi-viewer for a switcher that I have in my home lab here, running a unlicensed version of Zoom ISO. Sorry, Andy. And then let's say if I just wanted to create like a take button for this switcher, and you could do this. I've built these for vMix, and this one's for Ross Carbonite, but it's the same idea. So I'm just gonna build a little grid there and then put 2 buttons in it. And now if I double click one of the buttons, I'll name it take, and then add a task to that button. And here's where you can once you know the code for the Rostock or whatever kind of triggering you're going to do, you can manually type it if you just go into the OG script area. So OG script is essentially JavaScript with a couple of other fun stuff, ROS specific or OG OpenGear specific things. But if I just drag in a block for send TCP message, type in my IP address, don't hack me, and then type in, so this is mecut ME preview program. So I just happen to know that that's the string that my switcher is looking for when I do a cut. So now when I hit click take, then you'll see it taking the feed from preview to program. So, I mean, it's pretty simple to build fairly complex things. If we want to do a lab or something in after hours at some point, we can. The vMix one I actually made all the individual source boxes clickable.
Yeah.
So when you wanted, Mitch to be the source in program, you just click his face. So it's, there's a lot of capabilities there once you kind of dig into it.
No, absolutely. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Matt, thanks for being here with us. Is it possible to program to a hardware device like a Scarhoy? Seems like it could.
So the limitations are basically TCP. So if it can take anything over TCP, and I mean, there are lots of boxes. So there's boxes that do TCP to USP, TCP to serial, TCP to you name it. So as long as it can connect over TCP, dashboard can control it. And it's got an API. So if it can take commands, connects over the Ethernet in some way or fashion, even if there's a box in the middle, dashboard can control it. So I have yet to run into anything outside of Dante that I can't control. Dante is pretty closed. It's got its own thing going. But I mean, even daunting machines that have control protocols over TCP/I can still do. So yeah, it's like any hardware out there that you can think of, it can be controlled. And even like I said, like a little 12-volt motor I made.
And of course, it can be, you know, it can be looking for things too, right? So it can be looking for certain inputs or looking for something to happen, and then so you can set up dependencies. So you can arm something, and now it's going to wait until it sees something else, and then it'll automatically execute something.
Right. So, Mitch, I'm not sure if the Scarhoy does. I would imagine it does MIDI or some form of control like that. I haven't used a Scarhoy with dashboard, but I think we can. Kind of using the same methods that Matt was talking about, a USB joystick, you know, that kind of thing.
You can pull in a MIDI device as a joystick. So there's an option when you're loading it in. You plug it in with USB, and you can pick joystick, MIDI controller. As far as MIDI goes, it's not the most developed out. It's mostly just CC commands, but you get a ton of them. So there's a decent chance that it will work. I've got an X-Touch, like a Behringer X-Touch here that also runs on MIDI, but you can do it over Ethernet. So I wrote up a like MIDI over Ethernet. I forget what the thing's called, but there's a protocol of MIDI over Ethernet. So I wrote up a whole thing there. So I have my X-Touch that controls my Ultrix audio and everything. So there's a way to do it. You just may have to get a little bit dirty in the programming section. But one of the cool things is logic. It's being able to pile multiple actions into the same, say, button, or like you said, wait for something to happen and then trigger something automatically based on that.
Yeah, it's impressive, and it's free.
Yeah, and this might be what you were about to ask, but to continue on the devices. So Monogram, I think you might have had Monogram on a while back. They have the the control surfaces. So we can use that using the MIDI interface.
That's great.
Stream Deck has a native Rosstalk plugin for the native Stream Deck app, as well as Companion has extensive support. So I use a Stream Deck to control dashboard every day. A lot. That's one of my main workflows when we're on big productions.
That's great.
So Companion was what I was thinking of earlier that I couldn't remember the name of. So Companion, you could trigger the Companion buttons using HTTP. Well, Dashboard can do an HTTP GET very, very, very simply. And you literally just put that in, you put the button number, and I forget what the other code is. And boom, you've got the whole Companion thing in Dashboard that you can have sitting beside your NDI feed, that you can have, your Aja controller at the top. So you can combine all that. And that's kind of what we do, is you combine everything into one interface. Instead of having 4 or 5 interfaces, 4 or 5 people running a show, you do it yourself.
Right.
So
and I can see how, when you think about those tabs, you could also be sitting there going, this person gets this control, this person gets this control, and all of it's kind of, they're just opening different, they could potentially just be opening different tabs. So they're dealing with their part of the show.
And we often make custom dashboards depending on the operator. So for instance, a common use case for me, we operate a lot of football shows where we might have, we might be in one truck as the operators. We'll have a graphics producer that might be in another truck. Well, there's certain stats that they get throughout the game from their statistician, where I literally just give them a small dashboard panel that has the 4 text boxes that they need to type in the numbers that are going to be accurate at that moment. And I don't have to worry about it. They don't have to worry about double checking it. They type that in on their dashboard on their computer, and that data flows all the way to the graphic. So it's an easy way to divide up the labor, just have the buttons in front of the people who need the buttons.
Right. And they can say, well, I really wish this button was a little further over. And because it's not a lot of code, you just drag it over and publish it to them again. How easy is it for you to update it?
I mean, it's very easy. So everything's local file based. So it saves out as a .grid file. So it's not generally backed by a web server or anything like that. It's just a local file base. So if I'm updating something for my graphics producer, then I'll save it to Dropbox, give them the new link, and they'll download the new version of that file.
That's great. Got a bunch of questions.
If they built the file, they can move the button on their own. So if you're using a file, if you're using a grid file you made, it's like, oh, I don't like this button here. You literally just go into edit mode, move it over a little bit, go back out. Okay, No, it's
Right.
good.
Yeah, because
And
if you're not
it's
changing
really
the
important, though. I
functionality,
mean,
there's not a lot of programming. It's literally just open it up, move it, close it back up
that's
again.
one of the beautiful things about it is the ability to make the UI quickly. Everything else, you try to do a UI and a lot of other things that's fully
Right.
custom, and it's hard, takes programming. Like try to do a UI in Node and HTML and stuff like that. Like it takes a while. It's not custom. You can't just drag things. So to me, that's the magic. Combining this really easy to use UI, tweak it all you want, and you can put JavaScript, and I mean, it's literally magic. I saw this thing and they're giving it away for free when I started at Ross, and I was like, no, we're going to make money off this thing. Build a whole department around making money off of making custom dashboards, because why not? I mean,
well,
awesome.
and
Anyway,
it's something that we found a lot with when I do events, for folks, and we would give people advice all the time on their smaller events, because we knew eventually they were going to grow into a point where they went, hey, I can't do this anymore, but I can see what's possible now, and I know that I can't get there. so I'm going to hire someone to solve that problem, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Go ahead, Courtney and Mitchell, and then we're going to move on to the questions.
Yeah, does the UI automatically scale if you have different resolution monitors that you want to show it on 4K, 1080p, or 16 by 9, 4 by 3? Does it automatically
if you build
adapt?
it to scale, it will scale if you build it to scale. So you can set absolute positions in the buttons and UI. You can also set it to like you just put it in a certain I forget what it was, like weight and stuff for a table, for example, and then that will change
different resolution. Does it work?
Yeah, like depending on the resolution.
Yeah.
One thing to watch out for though is if you go from 1080 to 4K, things can get tiny. Writing can get tiny and stuff like that. So you gotta. Some things scale well, some things don't scale well. I keep virtually everything in 1080p HD when I'm making panels, mostly because they're running on a dedicated screen for it. So it helps just to really position things. A lot of times it's like you're running the show. If the button's here and the next button's over here, it takes a lot of time. So you really want, I really try and get down exactly, you're pushing this button and this push button, and I want them close. But it's a touch screen, so we don't want them too close because my fingers are big and I don't want to accidentally. And
so it's designed to work
it will scale
full screen, but different resolutions.
Yeah, so different resolutions. It will scale per resolution, but again, some things are kind of wonky. Like text gets really, really tiny, whereas the buttons will scale properly to the right size, unless they fixed it since then. But everything will generally scale if you don't use any absolute sizes. It will just scale automatically.
Gotcha.
And people do it all the time. They put in a little window that's in the top corner of the screen, just a part of the panel, the couple buttons they need or something like that. And it'll just scale down to those little buttons. And
then. And you could theoretically, you can put a button over top of something so you have live video coming in, but make that a button. Like you can just tap on, I see that live NDI feed and I'm just going to tap on it and pull it from there.
Yeah. So that was one of the things Bo showed. He's got his example of the NDI feed. So you could put a button, but you can also put just an abs, which is just an empty kind of panel thing. You can make them see-through. Same as buttons; they're clear. So you can have your multi-viewer with your NDI, and you can have each one be a button, and each one do a whole bunch of different stuff when you click on it. And actually built that for one of the customers. They're running event centers in their corporate buildings all over the world.
Yep.
And they wanted to get it down, so they have an audio person, camera person, lighting person. They wanted one panel, one person. So that was one of the things was they have it, they've got the overlay, the multi-viewer, and each one of them is buttons. So you can, depending on what you're doing, it's like you push the preview, it'll put in the program.
Yeah, especially when I'm presenting. A lot of times for me, when I'm presenting, I have a tool that I built that's a little more rudimentary than the one that you have, and I can look down at it and just tap on the screen and go, okay, I want that input, because and it's the live video of that, so that I don't have to think about it. I'm trying to reduce internal processing of figuring out what input I'm in and just tap on that to have it go. And it looks like that would be very doable. Mitchell, you have a question before we go to the other
ones? Real quick one. Matt, I love doing UIs. I'm a lousy coder, and I just want to hear it again coming from you. You're okay with designing any code that somebody may submit to you with a design?
So far, we have not been restricted. So, we do big companies. They like the branding. So we can get very, very custom and make it look really, really pretty, or it could be just like the gray with a couple buttons. It all depends what you want to do. Doing a rudimentary one, so just adding some color and stuff to your buttons and everything is pretty easy. You literally just go in and go to the style tab, add some color. If you want to get fancy, you can. So it's all depending on what you want to do with it. I mean, people like a lot of colors. Oftentimes they don't really like fancy. The corporate people like fancy. They like it to be branded so that when the execs come in, they see the screen, they see it because, it's in the event center, it's in the back of the room. Whereas a lot of the producer or the TV places, they just don't care. They just want buttons and they want them very clear. This one's red, this one's bright green, this one's pink. So I don't even have to read the buttons. I just see them and push it. So it's very easy to just design things like that. And I mean, you can make it pretty. Bo?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Mitch. Yeah, you design it, and we'll get Matt to build. Make it work. Matt's the guy that I call when I can't figure out how to do something in Dashboard. He makes it work.
Do you a lot of times when people just send you, like, they'll go into something and just lay out, like, this is where I want all the keys and this is what I want the keys to do, and I imagine that speeds things up for you a lot.
Yep.
Just have these are the functions that each key has.
Yeah, so when people come to us, it's basically either they come to us knowing nothing and they're just like, we got all this equipment. Okay. And then we'll figure something out, how to tie it together, whether it can talk. We'll program up all the APIs. We'll build a thing for them. Or they come to us with a big document with screens of exactly how it wants to look. And then we go, thank you. That makes life so much easier. Exactly. It's fun to be creative, but when they've got a plan already, it's a lot easier. Yeah. So people will just make one up in whatever program they want off and just send us a PDF done in Photoshop. Sometimes they'll just Photoshop Dashboard and start putting buttons and move them around and stuff like that. But so we can build it off anything. We can build it off a design. We've been able to build every design that anyone's ever given us. We can build them from scratch. We don't really care.
That's great.
It from scratch takes longer, costs you more.
Yeah, exactly. It just adds up. Let's go to the next question.
Next question in for Michael Graves in Houston, Texas. Michael's asking, was the software created by Ross in-house or brought in originally?
Go ahead, Bo.
Created by Ross.
Yeah, I think it predates me, but to be clear, me and Matt are not on the Dashboard development team, as in creating the software. That's another team in Ross that makes that dog food, and we are just in a group that eats that dog food. So
we're the services
we use Dashboard
group
every day. Yeah,
we're internal customers to Ross, so technically we consume Ross products and we do things with them, but we don't make the Ross. Having said that, though, I do actually work with the Dashboard team all the time. I've helped them put stuff in there. I've helped the hardware guys with some of their code. I'm a programmer background, so. Yeah, we built it up. It's made out of Java. We started it from scratch a long time ago. It's one guy, James Peltzer, I think, from Ross. He was the main brain behind it, and our CTO long time ago. I don't even know if he was CTO at the time. Him and James kind of wrote the whole thing together, and so it's fully internal. It's internal, but it works with OpenGear. So I don't know how much you guys know about OpenGear, but that's open, and that protocol. I mean, you can just get information about it and everything. But
I think that it's that we always talk about the power, if a brand understands it, is to commoditize the things that aren't key to their income and then control the things that are. And I think it looks like, between OpenGear and this, Ross has gotten really good at commoditizing this thing. Like, we're not going to have you make, we don't need to make money on that. We just need everyone to use it. And then really focusing on the things that do set you apart.
And I mean, Ross is a hardware company, right? Like I mean, we're software a little bit, but in the end, it's mainly a hardware company. So it's a good way to have a control interface that's easy to use and everything.
Absolutely. Next question.
Jack Cannon in Phoenix, Arizona asks, is there a marketplace for pre-built modules or a user forum?
So we are actually very shortly going to be starting to put up pages in our Shopify, not going to say Spotify this time, Shopify shop for our team. So basically we make some pages, we make some panels, for example, for our little Ultra Touches, and we can just sell them out of the thing. So you could technically make a panel and sell it if you wanted to. Anyone can. There's no rules against it. Make yourself a KeyPro or a HyperDeck or something panel that people can just then buy off you. It is open, though. These are just text files. So the .grid file is just a text file. All JavaScript and everything in it is open. So once you sell it to someone, they can then turn around and start selling it on you. And there's not really much protection around there. It's very, very open. So
we've been talking to a lot of us that work with nodal compositors. That nodal compositors do the same thing, where you can concatenate everything together and pull it all together. And I've always thought that there is the massive business of, I can build something, encrypt it, and then sell it. And it just has the in and outs that I gave you. And I can, and I feel like that marketplace is an untapped, for many things, for many companies, because you'd end up with people who can make money just sitting there thinking of cool things rather than just making it for themselves. Right now everyone just is really sharing what they know, or even if they sell it, the problem is, as you said, it's opened. So they're also selling all their secret sauce.
You can encrypt and password protect it. So it's just simple encryption. It's not the most protected, but you can encrypt and password protect. And we do that with several of our panels. But my team, we sell the source code to the customers. So they can protect it if they want. But you can make a panel, you can protect it, you can sell it all you want. Some hacker could probably break into it. They're probably not going to, because what's the point? I mean, people buy it for convenience.
It's not that big of a business.
You could definitely do that. There are people that do that out there. There's a whole bunch of dashboard people. You can also just do custom jobs for people.
Right.
Instead of building and selling a panel, do what we do, but on your own.
Yeah, Bo.
Yeah, you can, two things. You can find, if you just kind of Google around, you can find a good many GitHub pages that have panels up that people have made and different interfaces to different blinds and, all kind of, lighting outlets and all kind of things.
It's basically like a free version. If you put the hardware together, it's basically does pretty much everything that a Crestron would do. Is it?
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
That's one of the things that we're playing around with a lot right now. So we work with Crestron. We can also, depending on what's in the room, you can have a room that has Crestron controlling some stuff. Dashboard and Crestron can talk together. Crestron can control everything. Dashboard can also control everything. Big difference there is it's really expensive to hire a Crestron developer. You can build your own dashboard stuff. It's open. So that's one of the kind of differences there. Yeah. But there are no modules like Crestron where you can just buy the modules and just put them in like Crestron has. So there's good and bad, but it's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's control software that can control anything. You just make your own modules.
Next question.
And then,
go ahead, Bill, before we jump.
No, just to finish up on the last part of that question, user forums. There is, Ross has user forums. It's called Living Live Community. You can find it on the Ross Video website. And there is a dashboard forum in there. And, depending on your question, a lot of times James hangs out in the dashboard, the original developer, and he'll answer your question if one of us don't get to it first.
That's awesome. Next question.
Chris Sabato, Albany, Oregon, asking, is there a built-in method for accessing a dashboard from the public internet, or do you have to set up a VPN?
VPN, it depends how you want to set it up. So you can make a TCP connection in dashboard. So TCP connection's the base of most networking stuff. So it's the same as with any building. Trying to get something coming into a building is not the easiest through the network security, IT. Depending on how big your company is, there's going to be more security and less likely to be allowed to do it. It's a lot easier over VPN. You get local access. Going out of a building, so for example, like a web browser who makes a connection to a page and then back and forth, easy. So I've done it several times where I've got an AWS instance in the cloud that is doing something to do with data or has a web page or something, and Dashboard will make an outgoing TCP connection to that you can then use back and forth to send from that web server to Dashboard and back. And we did that with, there was a boxing thing that we did at one point. So basically the boxers, they punch, it's like a video game that we made, but with real people, punch, sensors in their gloves, that data goes there, and I pushed it all up to the web server betting company would push things back down, like odds and stuff like that you can then display in the dashboard. So you can make that back and forth if you know a little bit about Node and or something along those lines to make servers. But if you just want raw connection coming in, if it's your house, toss it in the port forwarding in your router, good to go. If it's an IT department, maybe talk to them first.
Go ahead, Bo.
Yeah, and it kind of depends on what you're trying to do, because most of what we're talking about right now with Dashboard is just custom panels that are controlling devices. So if you're just sending a trigger or receiving a trigger, that's easy to do with VPN or I've used Cloudflare tunnels or zero tier. A lot of different ways to just open one port or get one port back and forth to a different network. Dashboard, we haven't really talked about this use case of Dashboard, but Dashboard is also like Matt said, Ross is a lot of a hardware company. So dashboard is the user interface. It's the software component to a lot of Ross's hardware. So, I have a hardware switcher and a hardware router downstairs in my rack, and dashboard is how I access the settings and the all the parameters that are contained within that. So getting all of that data from those, to control all of your hardware, that's a much heavier connection than just sending a TCP trigger. So Dashboard has implemented like a proxy server to make it easier to go across the wide area network, but it's a little trickier to set up. But as far as just triggering something, a button in the cloud or a button, at home to trigger each other, it's really easy to do using a VPN or, any of the other tunneling methods.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Courtney.
For triggering IoT devices like IoT lights or blinds or things like that, is it Matter compatible? Does it have a Matter output for that protocol?
It would depend on what the device has. So if the device has some sort of open protocol, which most things do at this point, yeah, you can control it and you can make it do things. If it doesn't have an open protocol, then you're kind of.
And I think Matter's open, but it's new enough that you might need a parser, to go from one to the other.
You may need a parser. So a lot of things take JSON now, which is really nice. Just REST calls with JSON. A lot of things are just a string of bytes. So you got to figure out which bytes to send. Some things are just text character strings. So it all depends on what the device is looking for as far as a connection. You can also do GPIOs. So for example, if you've got a GPI, you might need some sort of GPI hardware in between. But I mean, at that point, it's just you tell it fires off, it puts the pins low or high or resistance or whatever. So it all depends on the device. Every device is different. But most devices that I run into now have an API. It's either open or you buy it off the company. And with that, you can do anything the device will let you do.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent. It runs on the Mac, right? It runs pretty well on a Mac. Kind of, sort of. Whoop, can't hear.
Yes.
There we go.
Yes.
Yeah. Mac, Linux, and Windows.
Does it see siphon? Do you know?
No.
Okay.
No, I think the most recent update to Dashboard does have NDI5, but it does not have Siphon.
Yeah. I was thinking about a solution. Next question.
From Marty Ateas in Maryland asking, how much can non-programmers do with Dashboard?
Well, that's the beauty of the visual part. You don't actually have to be a programmer. So Bo had showed, and I showed how to put just to open a file. So there's a file read. You just drag the block in, put your file name in there. Bo showed how to make a TCP connection. So you just drag a TCP connection block in there, put your IP, put your command you're going to send. And so if you're not a programmer, you can get pretty far. I mean, you just use visual logic. And I mean, you put the arrows to the other spot. I mean, you guys, if you've done anything, lots of things have visual logic. So you're probably used to that.
Yep.
So there's both. So and if you make a function in an API, it will also become a visual logic block. So you can have someone who is good at JavaScript write you up a function, and then you stick it in an API, and now you've got it as a visual logic block. You can pull in, and you're good to go again, and you don't need to be a programmer.
Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, asking, you mentioned lights. Does this control DMX as well?
Well, look at my face. Look at it. See, look at how purple that is. So that's through EOS.
How's that working?
So,
how's that getting from your dashboard to the lights?
See if I can. So there's the light back there.
And that's and DMX control.
Here's a touch screen that I've got right here. If I can get my camera proper. So here's a touch screen I've got right here. So this controls my room. The room's not fully set up yet. But for example, it's blue. Or I can, green things up. Or I can go,
And how is it sending those commands?
What's that?
What's the logic that it uses to send those commands?
So what it's doing is it is sending to EOS. You guys don't want to see my chest there. So I've got an EOS gadget. So that's the DMX to USB that goes into a laptop that is running just EOS, etc. software. So EOS, you'll have EOS, etc. You might have like Paradigm or something. You might have just a full hardware controller. You might just have the software. You send commands to that. It does the DMX. So it doesn't natively do DMX. But virtually every lighting controller out there takes usually OSC strings. So if you could do OSC at all, you can do it. And you can also do it through Companion. I mean, put your OSC in there if you don't know how to do OSC API, and you can just trigger those through Dashboard as well.
That's great.
So
Next question. Next question.
And it's from Matthias Utilia from Helsinki, Finland, asking, is there a clear list for supported devices? For example, with no coding knowledge, what kind of production gear I can start using without custom code writing?
Ross stuff. That's pretty much it. There's a few other ones like a Panasonic camera. Hello to Helsinki. I was just there back in November working at one of the TV stations there. So that was a fun trip. My first time ever there. So it's got Ross gear integrated into it. You can just pull those devices in. Some other things like Panasonic PTZ camera, it'll integrate with joysticks and stuff. But for the most part, hardware. There's so many devices out there. It would be hard to build things in, and then it would end up being expensive, like Crestron and everything.
Yeah.
So basically, it's just open, and if you can write the code, write the code. And like Bo said, there's a ton of forums out there that have people have already written it up. I mean, I work for Ross. We do this, and I took my first AJA Keypro code out of one of the forums that someone had just, hey, I figured out how to do it. So I just copied their forum post and then modified it up since then. But there's a ton of just control code out there.
Yeah. Bo?
Yeah, the only other thing I'll add is early in the pandemic, one of our guys put a zip file of a ton of different kind of starter panels to show you all the different things that Dashboard can do up on the forum. So if anybody wants access to that, I'll send you a link. Just hit me up in Discord. And, it's a whole list of things just to show you an example panel of how you would import a file or how you would make a button change color, or, just all kind of fun things. So anybody that wants to play around, just hit me up in Discord and I'll send you a link.
Sounds great. Next question.
Paul Buchan from Columbus, Ohio, has a question. One feature that I love is how simple it is to grab components from existing devices. For example, Carbonite. Can you show that?
Go ahead, Bo.
Yeah, so I had just a few seconds to get this set up. So this is so what I was talking about earlier. If you look on the left side of my screen here, it's probably kind of small, but you can see these are all the Ross devices that I have on my network. So these just automatically show up. It recognizes that these are local to my network. So it sees that I have a Open Gear frame with some cards in it. I have a Carbonite Ultra, a Ross Ultrix, and then a Carbonite Ultra. So this is the virtual panel. So to show you what Paul's talking about, so this is essentially a virtual version of what my switcher is doing right now, and it's fully operational. So if I were to, change from Zoom ISO input 1 to Zoom ISO input 2, that would happen on program right now. So, I think y'all are all very familiar with that in the Blackmagic world. It's very similar. The cool thing that Paul's mentioning, if I just drag this panel over here, on the right-hand side, you can see that this is my custom panel that I started building earlier. So I can literally just go down here, and if I wanted to, instead of, earlier I wrote the code to do this, but if I put this in edit mode, put this in edit mode, I can drag the cut button from one panel to the other one, and now it's just there, and it'll do the thing. So,
and for all the Ross hardware, it already has this built into it. So it'll just come with everything that you would want in a dashboard, and you're just simply just dragging those buttons over to whatever you want to use. So you could open this up, kind of pre-build, I just want these buttons, and I don't want the rest of it, and you just build your own.
Yep. And like in a house of worship
as well. So if
like
you've got
in a house of worship
frame,
scenario, yeah, sorry, Matt. In a house of worship scenario, we see a lot of times like volunteers, they just want to give somebody the buttons they need. So you give them the cut button and the button to turn the lower third on and off, and that's all they need. So that's what you give them on their panel, and that's all they get. So it's very customizable in that way.
That's great. Next question.
From Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. Can more than one instance of Dashboard, even running on different platforms, control and override commands for a device?
Yes. So you can have it, just be careful. So for example, if you've got two people in two different spots running the same thing, let's say camera presets, and it's the same show, you can screw things up. But yes, we even have it set up with some customers where they'll have a studio, say in, Sydney, Australia, but then the people running it are actually sitting in New York City. or there might be a studio in New York, one in Paris, one in the UK, and then the guy running it's in Sydney. So they'll be able to log in there from either multiple locations to control one studio through VPN or elsewhere. Oftentimes we'll have multiple panels open in the same spot. So you might have a couple different rooms that have the same panel running so that you can say, turn the lights on and off. So this, like the kitchen there's a bank that we did. The kitchen's got a panel. The studio's got a panel. The podcast room's got a panel. All of them allow you to just turn the lights on and off in whatever room and then set the studio up for whatever room. So you can have multiple instances of the same panel. You can have the panels talk to each other, make a TCP connection and have them talk to each other so that if you press off on one, the other one lights up the off button and it knows, or you can just be dumb panels with buttons. So yeah, you can connect it to multiple panels to the same device, no problem at all.
Hey, go ahead, Bo.
Yeah. A while back, we were talking about fly kits, and one of the things that I always put in my fly kits, I usually put in 2 or 3 nooks in there just so that I can team view into those computers, have those computers running dashboard. So I'm not really running dashboard across a VPN. I'm locally controlling dashboard on a PC that's local to the network, and I'm just remoting into that machine. So that's the typical use case we'll see that TV stations or people use when they have remote operators. Now this screen, like I showed you earlier, for the Ross hardware stuff, when I click, when I put ISO 1 in program, that's going to be reflected across all dashboards talking to this machine. So it's not like it would get in a funky state where one person thought that something else was in program. That it's bidirectional where that info would travel to all those dashboards that are controlling that.
And this gets where this gets where it gets important to give everybody different interfaces. Like you might have someone who's at central control that is saying, oh, I want to change any of the dashboards. But when you hand it to different operators, I know when we build a lot of this custom stuff, we try to separate those out so that very rarely do both people have the same button for the same thing. We split that up and you can see how easy it is. We can just grab things. We can build this new grid, grab a bunch of stuff from that main interface, set it all up the way they need it, and then grab other parts of it and put it somewhere else into another grid and relatively easily separate those controls out. It's really
yeah. And there have been times, if there are times where I'm nervous that somebody's going to control something where I don't mean for them to, there is a way to kind of have a running log, and there's a debug mode or a debug window where you can just write stuff to the log. And so I'll always kind of have a little snippet in there that tells me who pushed the button that did the thing. So I know where that command came from.
Right. Next question.
Next question is coming in from Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota. Tommy asks, can you set up a Ross Synergy 100 video switcher surface with dashboard?
Do we know?
We'll have to get back to you on that.
Is that an old?
Yeah, it's an older switcher, but dashboard's been around. I think so. I'm not sure if you'll be able to get that same switcher panel view like I was just showing you with the Carbonite.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I can get back to you though.
You'd probably have to build your own panel and
Right.
then send whatever commands over to it that needs to be sent or modify the params. But
yeah,
maybe.
Maybe. Next question.
Dave Trotman in Edmonton, Canada. Can we get the classic Ross Vision mixer lighted buttons on the interface?
So I guess the question there is, so you can drag those buttons out, but the question is, can you put images in for all of this? So if someone wanted it to look pretty and have different images for every state, you could do that, right? I mean, if you really wanted to make it look realistic.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know exactly what he's asking there. It might be.
I think that the idea is could you have it look like the Ross switcher with the, so if you had the hardware buttons and everything else, you'd have them really look realistic. And can you like when the state right now changes the color, could it change a picture? So it can say, I have this picture up when it's in off. I click on it and it goes red, and now it looks like a red button. That's lit. Can it swap those images out when they're in different states?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll pull something up. Here
This
in a
gets back
second
into what Matt was talking about with the
to show you.
For clients, like, oh, look at the pretty thing. It looks like the thing. And, you know, so that might be more of the, yeah. This gets, into, client facing versus production facing requirements. But I think in some ways it also might help, folks that are used to the piece of hardware going, oh, I know exactly. I mean, I think that most of the placement is all that's necessary, but it might make them feel warm.
All right, here we go. I've got a little something I can show you. So it's not a perfect example, but down here at the bottom, you can see my machine control. So this is a scenario where when I click a button, I want it to send a command, and this is where I'm telling it to go. So which computers I'm enabling it to, where I'm telling it to send the command and which computers I'm not. So if I wanted to send that command to all the computers I have, then I, click those buttons, light them up. You see the chain link kind of goes solid there. So yes, you can easily make buttons into, you can add photos to buttons and make them kind of specific to what you want to do.
That's great. Next question.
Next one in from Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. Kenny asked, will a command from one instance of dashboard send an indication, light, etc., to another instance to ensure current status?
I think we covered that a little bit, but it does. They're all updated, right? They're showing the current state.
Yeah, you get that for free.
What's that?
Yeah,
if
you
you're
get that for free with
like
dashboard.
soft panel on the Carbonite, then that will automatically happen. If you're building your own panel, you would have to do that yourself. So you'd have to make something that talks to the other instance of the panel that says do something. But any built-in panels reflect the hardware state on a constant basis. So like Carbonite or Ultrix or anything like that would always, any instance running will always show whatever the hardware is running. So I mean, you could build your panel like that too. Build your panel to always get status from the hardware, and then you could do that. You can build your panel to talk back and forth. Right. But a lot of it you have to do the custom stuff. Unless it's Ross gear, you'd have to do that yourself.
You're gonna say something, Bo? Same thing.
No, just following up on what Matt said. If you're custom doing something, then you can build in listeners. Like for instance, I had built a kind of a proof of concept Zoom ISO, so where it's listening from Zoom ISO to hear who the active speaker is, to see, and that name pops up on the dashboard. So you can do bidirectional communication pretty easily. It's not as easy as just the visual logic blocks necessarily. You have to kind of put some thought into it and maybe dig into code a little bit, but it's very doable.
Next question.
Albie Lopez from San Antonio, Texas. Does this control Aputure Sidus Lights? I believe it's through Bluetooth. What solution for Bluetooth to TCIP? Thank you.
So it probably doesn't do it natively, but how would you, if someone asked you to do that, how would you kind of approach that?
So what I would do is, there's no native Bluetooth support in dashboard. So you can't hook up to a dashboard natively. But I bet you if I do a real quick Google search, I can find something that will take a Ethernet cable in or Wi-Fi and will send Bluetooth out. Right. So then again, it depends on like that device, whether you can find that device and whether it will work with whatever you're trying to do. But there's no native Bluetooth itself connectivity.
Right.
So it depends what you're sending over the Bluetooth and what it's using to receive it.
Fantastic. Matt and Bo, this has been awesome. Awesome hour of really going. I think that Bo has shown us this a little bit here and there, and in after hours, and we just really wanted to bring you guys on and take a look at it a little bit and dig into it a little deeper. I'm hoping that we can put together some labs, inside in after hours where I might get you guys to come together. We'll think of like a specific mission that we're all going to try to put together and something maybe start off simple. But I think it's a really powerful tool, and I think that regardless of whether we're using the Ross hardware, we know it's easier to use it with the Ross hardware. But the idea that we could control, I was thinking I have some stuff in my pool. I was like, it'd be good to be able to turn those things on and off, build my own little controller for it. So anyway, I think that those it's really, really extensible. And I think that what really opened it up for me is all those libraries that you showed, realizing that there's OSC handlers and all these other handlers that we can add. And then it's just a matter of now it's just buttons, that we can send out those commands. So, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, it's great. Really, really great to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
we might bring you back. Have you talk about some more stuff. It's really, really fascinating. Thanks so much to the producers for all the great questions, keeping these hours going. Thanks to the panelists. Can't do this without you, of course. And thanks to the incredible team, the small village that gets up every day, 7 days a week to run the show from all over the world. We really appreciate all your work. We've traveled a little bit of ways. We had a lot of people in a lot of different places this week. Today we traveled 129,000 miles between all the people asking questions and answering questions. We traveled 100. We would have gotten to 1K in 2 hours, which is pretty impressive. 207,000 kilometers, 1.168 billion bananas for scale. So just to kind of keep all those things straight. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours.
This is where people start whispering.
I whispered. I tell Mitch, I saw your hand, but I was already in the landing sequence. I was like, I don't know where to go from there.
I can't hear you if you're whispering, though. Dude, talk louder.
Is that a button on the dashboard? The whisper.
The whisper button.
Exactly. Just turn it up. Exactly.
We're not Ross Audio.
Well, Sinky thing I talked about was all audio. Full audio panel, audio mixer.
Yeah, we like our audio. All right, here we go.
Thanks, guys.